Hello everyone, welcome to this episode of Beat Teacher Burnout. Today we're going to be looking at how to create healthy teams, how to support each other so we don't burn out, and lots of other stuff too. And I'm really delighted to have Nick Osborne on my podcast today because I've been watching some of what he's posting as a CEO. And it's making me laugh. He's really having some fun with leadership and the reality in schools. And I think the first time I ever was introduced to you, Nick, was when I read a post you did that you'd been sacked, actually. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Good. Well, I'm assuming you haven't been sacked. So do you want to tell us a little bit about your story, how you got to be where you're at?
Yeah, certainly. So I was a primary teacher for a number of years, and then I became a head teacher of a primary school. And I joined shortly after it had come out of special measures. And it had sort of half a new staff of a single form entry school. So that was a really interesting start to my career because it was all about when you're a school that small, most of the staff are new. So not everyone knows the systems and processes. You spend your first year just trying to come up with systems and processes together, get to know each other, and you kind of work on building the culture of what almost is a new school together because you've not got that, this is how we do things here. So I started my leadership career that way. And after a couple of years, we had an inspection and the school was graded outstanding, which we were over the moon by.
Yeah.
There was still plenty of things. I'm still not a fan of the grades because I would get people, once your Ofsted report's live, they'd ring me up and say, "Oh, I've seen that you got this. Can I come and see how you do this subject?" And I was like, "You can, but it's not the greatest." But the ones that we had to show, we could do well. So then from there, I was asked to become an executive head of a school that was in trouble. It had really poor results. It was a two-form entry school, so it was bigger than our single form. And I went in the January and I had to the local authority found me a head of school and we just had to go in. We went in over the Christmas holidays and looked around and looked at the books and we were really kind of horrified by what we could see. And when you first start in that position, you go into like a Superman pose, like, I can do this, I will save these children's lives. And there's a bit of hubris about the process, and but you're keen to go on. And so I led that school for a number of years and we turned that school around. And then I was asked to have a third school in the local authority. And from there was the natural progression to take on, to turn it into an academy chain, because it was the time when the white paper that came out said we were all going to need to do that. So like a good boy, we started that. And then we've grown over a number of years. So we're 12 primary schools and one primary special now. And so I lead that trust, which is a completely different job to being a head teacher and a teacher, and not what I trained for at all.
So you got to learn a whole new load of skills, I guess. Yeah. So, Nick, for the purpose of the podcast, I guess, can you tell us where you have seen as a teacher or leader, where you have struggled and what you've done with it?
Yeah, so where I struggled, there's two times where I've struggled the most. The first was when I took over that second primary school. And once you get past the initial, right, we've got to work on this, we've got to work on this, we've got to work on this, the problems just keep coming and they don't stop. So it's financial, it's teaching and learning, it's the buildings, it's the local community, it's HR issues, it's just non-stop. And then I had the pressure from the local authority at the time, who meant well, but were like, you've got to move quicker, you've got to move quicker, you've got to move quicker. And you get to this point where you're just completely overwhelmed and there is nowhere to go. Like there's not enough hours in the day. You can't just work harder. And I would find that I was I'd fix one problem and then there'd be a bigger one. And we were trying to move people on at the same time. So we had less and less staff to do that. And it was just all consuming. So you'd get up and my job was to work across two schools. And when I'd pitched it, would be I'd do 2.5 days here, 2.5 days there. I was doing 4 days a week in one school. In the other school, I would be on the gate in the morning, so it looked like I was there. Teachers would see me, parents would see me. I'd get straight in my car and drive to the other one. It like took up my evenings, weekends. It took up my head of school's evenings and weekends, and it was just too much. There was just, and that was it. Your social life went. So I've learned from, it was a brilliant learning curve. I've learned now that actually having friends that do not care in the nicest possible way about schools and education is the best thing you can have. Because when something goes wrong, they don't care, or they'll say things like, oh, is that a bad thing? Or, oh, what does that mean? Oh, anyway, on to the next conversation. And when you live in a world, if all your people you know are in education, you're all consumed in it. So I learned at that stage was the importance of people outside. And then we started to turn a corner. People gave me those quotes, mighty through storms, mighty oaks grow, and all that. And that works for about 30 seconds. You're like, yes, I will do this. But that wears off. That wears off when you get the next complaint or the next fire to put out. But it did start to change around. And it started to change around when we got new staff in. And there was a switch there. So we had started in the January, we had our inspection in May. We got requires improvement with a couple of good elements. And I was over the moon. Like, it was better than the outstanding at the previous school. Over the moon. And like, I had no teachers and the long-term supplies were off. So I was doing parents' evenings. Like, I was running into a room, looking at some books and thinking, right, what can I say to the parent so they're getting? So I was like doing parents' evening with HLTAs and all sorts of people. Like, there just wasn't enough staff to go around. Then we recruited and we got a load of young kind of teachers in, and that wasn't a choice. Like, younger was better. It was just that was who we could get. So we had a load of NQTs back then, ECTs now, and then it changed. And then boom, like that, it changed. We had teachers teaching well in classrooms, which stopped the firefighting of behaviour, which meant parents were happier. So all the knock-on things that come. So as a leader, your job is so much easier if there's a good teacher in front of a child. And then if you can treat them well enough so people will get on well, mix, learn from each other, then that solves all your other problems. That solves your HR issues. That solves your training issues. So I think some big takeaways from that experience that I learned was, which I try to do with our leaders now, because I work directly with the heads and my executive team. So my day-to-day interaction isn't with class teachers. So I see it as that I can influence them so that they can then influence their staff. So some of the things that I've learned, and might not be the best way, but people need time out. They need time away from school to think, to switch off, to get some perspective again, which I couldn't get in those first 2 terms, but I could when I had some good teachers. So with our leaders now, I tried various things. So I started by saying to them, like, I want 3 days a year where you're not in school, right? You're not going to come into school. You can read, you can do whatever you want that will help you think about life, learning, children, whatever kind of frees you up. But so I was feeling like pleased with myself, like, hey, I've done this. And hardly any of them took it up, right? Because they felt guilty. I don't know if they thought it was a trick. I don't know, but you know what it's like. You block something in the diary and then something else comes up and you can't fit it in, but you think, oh, I've got this day. I've got this free day, so I'll pull it in here. So that didn't work. So what I had to then do was say, right, I want you to book in meetings with me. So I want you to book in a meeting. I want the meeting in the diary. I want you to tell me where we're meeting, what we're going to talk about, but I'm not turning up. So at least then it was in the diary and it kind of took the guilt away, because there was definitely some of that guilt about being away from school. And so that's been more effective. And then now we don't need to do that. We can say, look, make sure you manage your time. So I think that was a key thing about managing the well-being. And then another thing I do with our leaders as well is, like, we do a few things that might seem small, but I think psychologically they make a difference. So something I might do with some of our leaders that times might be a bit tough is we sit down and we go, right, well, the term ahead's coming. What do we know is going to go wrong? Right. And we try and write a massive list of, right, I'm going to get a complaint. I'm going to get 10 safeguarding incidents. There's going to be a behavioural. So they start listing it. And so we jot it all down. And then we go, right, so we know this is going to happen. This is the job. The job isn't the do everything else and these things get in the way. This kind of is the job. And then we get to the end of the term. And when we do a review, like, right, so how'd the term go? Like, what are your positives? Always start with what's your positives? What's gone well? What are you happy with? I kind of hear them. And then I say, right, I get the bit of paper out and say, so despite all of this, you've managed to achieve this. So we kind of do those sorts of coaching tools to try and help with the workload aspect. And then another one is speak to the schools about, we kind of call it free zones if you're running a school. There's no science or heavy research behind this, by the way, but we just say there's 3 zones, right? So zone 1, when you're in zone 1, your job is just to keep the school open, right? You've got a sickness bug that's wiped out half your staff, a boiler's broken, there's a leak here, right? Just keep the school open. That's all your job is to do, is so kids can come in today and learn, right? And then they're going to happen. We don't want them every day, but they're going to happen. Then we've got kind of zone 2, which is we might not have the boiler leak and there might not be as many staff off, but you might be putting out a fire, but you're trying to do a little bit more as a leader as well. You're trying to get around the classes, you're interacting, you're doing more. And then you're going to get these times where things will be smooth. And these are the times to push on with the work that you really want to do with your staff, be it training, be it a different approach to the curriculum, whatever that be. That's when you do your kind of the work. So we try and say, look, if they're feeling under the cosh, look, you're just in zone 1 this week. Just don't worry about it. Obviously, we don't want them there 52 weeks a year. But so we try to be realistic about the job, because I think we all suffer from the school or the trust down the road is perfect and they're not having these issues, and we are the only ones dealing with it, and that's not true. So I think there's some of the biggies we kind of do as an organisation.
I love that. I spoke recently to a head teacher who was completely frazzled and drained, and she was saying that basically she just felt she was firefighting and reacting to dramas all day. And we sat down and we talked about what her strengths were, and they were all around that strategic planning and the bit of the job that she really appreciated, where she was problem solving and data crunching and driving the school forward. But actually she wasn't using that because it was getting squeezed out all the time. And in what you've said already, you're giving your staff time, which is number one that they say they're short of, to prioritize that. But also you're looking at how to manage your expectations of a day, I guess. This particular head teacher discovered that if she took a morning out every week to do that side where she was using her really valued strengths, then she was more productive through the rest of the week because she was fulfilled already, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes the different environment can make such a difference. Often I might find, I don't know about you, but often I might find I might be on a conference or a training day and it kind of frees you up. So you're listening to the talk, but you then start thinking about other work issues and you start solving things or coming up with new ideas that you never would have had before. But it's just being in a different environment.
Yeah. Taking a bit of pressure off from the normal space that you're in. Nick, can I ask, how would you support now, having been through what you've been through with sort of turning schools round? If you had a new head in a difficult situation, how would you support them so that, I mean, I don't know how you didn't burn out with what you were doing, frankly. Maybe it was more short term so you could manage it. I'm not sure. Perhaps that's another conversation.
Yeah.
Or perhaps you've got some superpower of resilience. But how would you support a head now going into that situation?
So we've had some situations where we've had a school that sort of dropped off that needed turning around, and we kind of failed in the first instance because we put a head in and he was a great guy, but it was just too much. And it was at that time when I realized in order to turn around organizations, we have to give too much of ourselves. And it kind of becomes the norm that if you're having to turn around, that it will take over your life. So I know, for example, executive heads that have been brilliant heads, but it hasn't worked for them as an executive head. And I think it's because it's a huge job. So something that we try to do now, and I've got to thank my board for this, because they've made the strategic decision to support this. But we overfund the school in the first couple of years, and we will put in roles that will focus on a particular area. So that poor head, he was having to turn the culture around, deal with parents, change the curriculum, raise expectations, support teachers where there were some weaker teachers, and it wasn't a nice culture. And we were asking him to do it by himself and just develop his team. So now we take that away. So we say, look, the leader, you focus on your strengths, but we're going to put someone in the school who just works on teaching and learning. They haven't got a leadership title. They're not because as soon as you give them that, they get caught up in every other drama, and their job is, and I mean it just, but it's the most important job, but just work on teaching and learning. Work with teachers, support teachers, team teach, film. You do that. That's your job. So the head's kind of freer to do that. And then what we do is we subsidize the budget so that their leadership team can be a bit top heavy in that first instance. And because you're often having to deal with a huge number of kind of HR parent issues, and that or get new policies, and that takes time. And it might sound like you're only kind of looking at the leadership level, but this goes down. The more pressure you're taking off the people running the school who are responsible for it and carrying that, the easier it is for them to do the protective layer for the next level down and the next level down after that. So that is a deliberate approach that we have now. Or we'll call people in from other schools. And I think, and if I wasn't in a trust, so I'm not doing this as a kind of sales pitch for Academy Trust, but if I was going back to the early days, I would have, and I could speak to the Nick from back then, I would say, don't cut out ego. Don't worry about having to do this by yourself. Draw upon your networks. Ask people, because most people in the profession want to help each other. Yeah. So it would be, if I wasn't in a MAT, it would be about who do I know in the local authority that can support me for a term or 2 terms, or if I have a day a week, or it would be build up the team to do the heavy lifting in the early days. And then you can get back to a kind of normal structure.
Yeah, I love that. So you've sort of told us about how you support your leaders and stuff. What about, I mean, obviously teachers, they're shouting about workload at the moment. And what would you be saying that you are doing to support that for your staff?
So one of the kind of operational areas we've got on our trust development plan this year is around reducing workload. And it's really hard, right? So we said, when we kind of launched it, we said, look, we're gonna have a look at what work we're going to stop doing. We're going to be brutally honest and say, we're not going to do this anymore. It's not having the impact for the effort. Then we said, we'll look at tasks that we might do them, but we might do them at a 50% kind of ratio. And then we'll look at where we can use the power of collaboration to share resources and share planning, share reports. And it sounded great, like when we came up with the idea, but it's a lot tougher because people are so the first people I started with were our heads at our monthly leadership days. And it's really hard to kind of say, oh yeah, I'm going to stop doing this, or to go, oh, I might cut back on that. So we've done some stuff. Like there might be certain documents that you have to put on your website that we might not put the effort in that we used to. And we might look at each other's, and there might be a bit of cut and pasting. It's meant that a lot more policies and documentation go trust central. So we've always, as a trust, we've not tried to be a one size fits all, but we've kind of almost had permission from our heads to say, can we have this done at trust level? Can we have a template for this? So we've been able to do stuff like that. But classroom wise, it was hard for people to kind of let go, because there's the fear that while you're trying to drive results up, that if you do less, then the results won't improve and you get worse, and what will happen for that. So we've had to do a lot of work about saying we can get things wrong. If we drop something and then it has a negative impact, we tried it and we go back. So we've had to do a lot of mindset work on that. And then the most important thing we've done of late is just go directly to the teachers and TAs, support staff in the schools, to say, we just asked them 2 questions. So we asked them, what tasks do you do that we could either stop or reduce the level of effort we put into them? Oh, and we asked 3 questions. Sorry, that's a lie. The second question was, what do we do that you feel is a waste of your time and doesn't have any impact? And then the third element was, what do you think happens in your school that's really good practice that we should be doing across the whole trust? So that's kind of, and then so we got, and I put the survey out to staff, and then someone emailed me back to say, look, Nick, I think you should make these anonymous if you want true answers. So we had to reset it. So I was like, yeah, fair point, make it anonymous. So it went back out, and they've come back in a few different themes. So we have assessment is a key one, and people talking about live marking and dead marking. Yeah. So that's definitely something that we're going to be looking at, about the balance of live marking, and if we do marking that once the child has gone from the lesson. So that's something that we're needing to look at. Subscriptions has come back as one that came back a lot. So we had a lot of teachers saying, look, I pay for this subscription myself, I don't think it's fair. And I think that's a fair point. So, but that sounds like an easy one, but it's easier said than done, because some schools, you want certain subscriptions for certain curriculum approaches. So it's not a case of having them all. So we're going back to the individual schools to say, individual staff again, to say, right, so what subscriptions are you using? What subjects does this help you with? Then kind of going back to the leaders going, look, does this work? Does this marry up? So subscriptions, because people are starting to use AI much more. Mm-hmm. As a trust, we've given permission to use it. Like we've said, don't hide. It's not cheating. Like, use it to tidy your writing up. Use it for ideas. Like, it does the donkey work, but you still need the human element to get it right. Yeah. So subscriptions came back. Feedback came back. The time of day of particular tasks that staff do. So staff meetings, professional learning networks, how they access their CPD came up. And then we also had around planning and the sharing of resources. So they were the most kind of really sensible themes that came back. And so now what we're doing is we're kind of working on some ideas around each of those. So this is where we could go with the planning. This is where we could go with the marking across the trust. This is where we could go with this. And then we're kind of going back to the teachers to go, this is where we think we can do it. This is where we think we can't, and the reason why. And trying to get them to comment on where they think we'll go next. So I do think that's a huge part of it. And I do think, this is kind of a statement it's hard, easier said than done. You've got to get in a kind of state of flow with your job, right? And you've got to give, I say this to leaders, I say this to teachers, the bits about the job you love the most, a bit like your leader you talked about that like the strategic stuff, you've got to try and get more of that into your job. So I know, for example, in one of our schools, some of our staff said, we'd like the plans pre-done. It will save us so much time. And rather than, using our old ones and updating them, we'd like pre-done plans, so and so. But then I've got teachers in other schools saying, we've got pre-done plans. It takes the joy out of the job, and it takes there's not one answer to that. It's a bit like emails, when you say, we always have our email always, you can email whenever you want, but you can't expect a response whenever you want. So you can only expect a response in working hours. But some people, because we tried a block on that, people saying, I get emails out of work. But then I had others saying, but that's when I want to check my emails. And then I get to work on a Monday morning and I know there's going to be 100 emails. So it's about working with staff on the ground to know what gets them in a state of flow, and how can we spend more time on that? Because we all know when it's something we enjoy, it doesn't feel like work, does it?
No, absolutely. And it also reduces your stress. So I love what we're finishing on today, because in my first book, I write all about teachers needing to understand what their strengths are, because then they can watch for when they feel best at work, when they go into that state of flow or flourishing or thriving,
Mm.
whatever word you want to use, because then if they have enough of using their strengths or their core competencies, then the stressful bits take less of a highlight, if you like, and the other bit grows. So it really is a key. Nick, you've given us so many wonderful insights. And are you happy if people want to sort of find out more about you or ask you questions for them to contact you?
Absolutely. Yeah, not a problem at all.
And where would they
Ah, right.
find you?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Nick Osborne, and I work for Maritime Academy Trust. So if you go through that link, you'll be able to find me, and then you'll be able to send me a direct message.
Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you so much. I appreciate your vulnerability as well, because your journey through has taught you some amazing lessons. So thank you so much, and thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. I hope you took something of value from today. If you want to connect, I'm at rowenahicks.com, or I have a Facebook group, which is Preventing Teacher Burnout. So I look forward to connecting to you at one of those.